Hey everybody, Mr. Hampton here, coming to you with an exam review for Part B writing. In the video, if you guys want to have your workbook available, it'll help to find the passages. If not, I tried to include everything on the presentation without using it. We're only really going to go over two things today. We're going to take just some brief looks at what is Part B as well as what is mimicry. And at the end of the video, I'll show you two exemplars from students in the past who chose certain compositions and then wrote Part B on it, so you can see what they did well, and then so that way you can base your own Part B off of theirs. And as always, feel free to pause or rewind the video at any time if you want to go back and see other things. Okay, so first thing first, we got to talk about what is Part B and how does that compare to Part A. Part B is much shorter. It's usually between 100 to 150 words. They're only looking for you to write about a half, maybe 3/4 of a page. If you're writing a full page, you've probably written too much. And that's because, like I said, it's only 100 to 150 words. It's going to ask you to write usually from an alternate point of view in the story, or it'll ask you to write a passage similar to the story and sort of change the formatting around. So you can do like an advertisement, you can make a speech based off of another speech, or if it's a fictional story that is highly descriptive, it'll ask you to sort of do the same thing, but maybe change the location. The key, though, is using the same type of language, like it says right here. Let me just show you some examples of Part B, kinds of the questions that they ask. This one is from Shooting an Elephant for Part B. It says, later that day, a member of the crowd records her thoughts and feelings in her diary about how the officer and the crowd behaved. Basing your answer closely on the material of the original, write the opening section of a diary entry. For this one, I mean, you're just writing from an alternate point of view. It's told by George Orwell, doesn't want to shoot the elephant, and now you're a member of that crowd, and you sort of recap what it is that you saw, and especially how the officer and then the crowd behaves. So those are two things you probably want to concentrate on right there. Second example is from Town Bombing. Basing your answer closely on the language and style of the original, write a description of another dramatic event, real or imaginary, or a peaceful environment is suddenly disturbed. So this one, you still maintain the original language and the original tone of it, but now you just change the location. Okay, so instead of doing a town that's being bombed, you can do a zombie apocalypse, or you can do a forest fire, anything that you really want, as long as it's 120 to 150 words. Third example is from a dining experience. For this one, it says, the same restaurant receives a very favorable review from another writer. Basing your answer closely on the material of the original, write the opening. Now for this one, the same restaurant receives a favorable review. So this is slightly different because you're not supposed to be the writer himself writing a negative review. So instead, you sort of have to maintain the tone, the things that he talked about, but now you have to turn it from negative into positive. But I do want to specify one thing about Part B. Sometimes they like to trick you on Part B. An example of that would have been from Shopping for Stories. For this one, it says, the writer's mother has become concerned about her daughter's great interest in buying old clothes. In a letter to a friend, she outlines her thoughts and feelings about it. Basing your answer closely on the material of the original, write the opening to the letter. For this one, you are not the daughter that's apparently crazy about buying clothes. Instead, you are the mother. So just like the last one we took a look at, now you just sort of have to change things around. You have to take the craziness and then sort of express how you feel about that craziness. So for example, when she talks about how the lace puff-up dresses speak to her, you have to talk about how that makes you feel as the mother. Last thing we'll talk about is mimicry, which is really the key to success for Part B. Mimicry is the duplication of the appearance or sound of a passage, and you can do this a lot of different ways. On the AICE exam, they're looking for you to do about 10 attempts at mimicry, meaning you take about 10 sections of whatever the passage was, and that can be a sentence, it can just be a few words, and you attempt to duplicate that in some way, usually pretending like you're the author himself, or if you're changing the point of view. I'll show you some examples on the next slide. Over here, this is just from the George W. Bush speech that we took a look at in class. For this one, A was comment on the style and language, and B was write the opening of a speech in which the same leader, that's George W. Bush, addresses the nation about a real or imaginary disaster elsewhere in the world. The key that I want to point out here is over here on the right-hand side. I don't know if you've noticed, But over here, this is sort of the key to how many comments they're looking for you to make. Remember I told you to get an A band, it's between 13 and 15 comments for part A. So you'll usually see a 15 over here. And then a 10, like I said, it's about 10 attempts at mimicry that they're looking for. So you want to aim for usually between 10 and 15 sentences, assuming you have about 10 words per sentence. You have to ask yourself a few things when doing mimicry. You have to ask yourself first, what does the author really do, and sort of how can I duplicate that? So is the author highly descriptive? Do they use a lot of metaphors? Do they use a lot of similes? And you just pick out those sentences and then sort of ask yourself, well, okay, how can I duplicate that using a different location, or pretending I'm somebody else? How can I duplicate the style of it? Last thing we'll take a look at is just some examples from students in the past and what they did on their Part B. This one is from Shooting an Elephant, and I thought it was a real good example of taking the original and then sort of spinning it and making your own from the different point of view. Okay, so for Shooting an Elephant, here's the original. This is just the beginning section, and I color-coded it so you can see how it lines up with the mimicry version, which you'll see in just a second. So for the original, but I did not want to shoot the elephant. I watched him beating his bunch of grass against his knees with that preoccupied grandmotherly air that elephants have. It seemed to me that it would be murder to shoot him. At that age, I was not squeamish about killing animals, but I'd never shot an elephant and never wanted to. Somehow, it always seemed worse to kill a large animal. Okay, so the mimicry version of this, that's been color-coded along. Remember, this is from a different point of view in the story, and it says at the top, it says that her thoughts and feelings, but you can totally make it a man if you want to. They're not going to dock your grade for that. The key is that you concentrate on the officer and the crowd, and you record your own thoughts and feelings based on those two things. So this mimicry passage, I saw the man approach out of the unbearable heat. His face and demeanor seemed unsure. He looked at the elephant, not like other hunters with the intent to kill. Instead, he looked upon it with great sadness, almost as if it was a family member on their deathbed. What I like about this is right here. We have the hesitation. Remember, we're concentrating on the officer. He didn't want to shoot the elephant, and we sort of have that duplicated from a different point of view. His face and demeanor seemed unsure, so both of those two things lined up. Similarly, we have instead, he looked upon it with great sadness, almost as if it were a family member on their deathbed. We talked about how him mentioning grandmother here is like, I didn't want to shoot the elephant, and it's like a family member. It would be murder to shoot him. So over here we have this unnamed narrator saying, oh, I looked at his face, and he really looked at the elephant like it was a family member, and it was on their deathbed, meaning I didn't want to shoot it. So you see how those two things line up. And if you look about at the bottom, I've used about 50 words to do this. Keep in mind, you have to make usually 120 to 150 words. So this is 2 right here, and you might get other credit or other things that you say in it, but remember, just take a piece of the passage, either a few lines from it or an entire sentence, and sort of duplicate that in your own way, either from a different point of view or maybe changing the location. The second and last one we'll take a look at is town bombing. For this one, you had to write about another dramatic event where a peaceful environment is suddenly disturbed. So the original, I just took it and then I put a little ellipse mark in it here because I skipped around just to show you how theirs lined up. The town far below was asleep. It lay pillowed on the secure shore. Violet shadows leaned against its pale buildings, and at last signs of terror and bewilderment appeared in the human anthill beneath it. Distracted midgets swarmed from the houses. This way and that they scurried, diving into openings and in the ground. Swift armored beetles rushed through the streets. White jets of steam rose from the locomotives in the station yard. The harbor throbbed. So over here, again, how I lined it up with the color code. We have peaceful environment, and then suddenly disturbed. So this person chose a forest. I believe this one is a forest fire that they wrote about. But over here we have peaceful environment, and that's how it lines up. The forest lay gently snoring with the last bits of night clinging on to the twinkles of starlight. Here was peace. Here was salvation. Deer, bears, caribou, disturbed from their restful sleep, catapulted like a cannonball into the great blue sky. So over here, we have using figurative language, okay? Literally, midgets did not run from the town, but instead, from the plane's point of view, it looks like they're all distracted midgets. It looked like they're armored beetles or ants. and that's what they see. So over here, from this point of view, it looks like they're shooting out of a cannonball into the great blue sky. I'm not sure what point of view they're writing from, but still we have a good lineup here with peacefulness. We have good figurative language here, good figurative language here, like a cannonball, which is a simile. And that takes about 40 words or so. So I'd probably triple that or quadruple it, and that would get me to my 10 that I would probably need. And that's basically it for Part B. It's not as complicated as Part A, and in fact the majority of your score comes from Part A, commenting on the style and language. But you can definitely boost up your score doing a fairly good job on Part B. So you want to make sure of just a few things. You want to make sure that you're commenting on the style and language for Part A, and then for Part B, that you're really taking lines or passages from it and then changing that point of view, but you still maintain the original style. Figurative language, descriptive language, if it's rhetorical devices, if you're using a speech. And that's essentially it for Part B. Okay, so we've come to the end of the video. If you guys have any questions or comments, or if you want to see other examples, feel free to email me, and we'll see you in class. Good luck on your exam.